Welcome back to Jolie's, where you can get spicy sausage, roasted nuts, and some premium React content from the tube. YouTube, that is. And today we are going to be watching this analysis of the Epic of Gilgamesh by Fig Tree. This is the first video from Fig Tree that I've ever seen, so let's get into it right now.
Welcome home. I've never asked a squirrel to tell me a story. I've never expected abstract thinking from a dolphin or assumed one could fabricate an entire new worldview and characters for me to imagine. Some would say that I should not expect these things from animals, that creativity, imagination is something that is solely human. I was a child lying in my bed, listening to my dad's stories from the floor, living, changing, restless creations that came.
Wow, she has a good childhood. Good luck dating her, fellas, because she has a strong man in her life, it seems.
To life the second the words left his mouth. They always had the opposite effect of a bedtime story. I would stare at my blank ceiling at night, recounting them in my mind over and over again, truly just existing in those fabricated worlds. I woke up, I ran off to school, I daydreamed in class, and when lunch came, knees grazed by grass and hands clasped in friends' hands, we made believe we were anything and everything. All this to say, regardless of whether or not animals have the capacity to be creative or create art, I will always go to a human when I want a story. They're definitely in my top 2 storytelling species on the planet, and they have been for a long time.
Wait, what's number 1? Or what's number 2 compared to number 1? I'm trying to think of what could be the closest thing to another storytelling species, because they're as far as I can tell, there is none. Maybe she gets into it. Maybe it's just a joke.
It's likely that humans have been telling stories to each other since gaining the ability to speak. There's something about our brain that craves knowledge, the joy of discovering. We just want more than what we can see through our pathetically limited eyes. Oral storytelling has been part of humanity for further back than we can even trace. Obviously, was and is a very large component of many civilizations. But I'm thinking,
I mean, honestly, I believe that storytelling is what made us human. It was what made us ascend to this, for better or worse, from sitting around the fire with the bros and the tribe, talking about the hunt that you were going to do, that you did earlier today, or telling everybody about how great your hunt was going to be tomorrow, to sitting in front of a camera and with a green screen behind you, talking about how your, I don't know how your day's going. But yeah, this is one of the key things, the ability to put ideas into other people, images and ideas into each other's minds, and creating emotional connection through that is almost like our superpower as a species compared to every other species that's come before. Possibly what made us beat out Neanderthal for contemporary domination of the world. For better or worse, who knows? Maybe this is you'd have the Russ Cole perspective, and this ability to string together stories in order to create a narrative of our own consciousness is like a disease that we're passing along to each other. If you want to believe that, brother, go on ahead. I guess I wouldn't recommend it, but it is kind of like this next level. I felt like I had something else to say to that. And yeah, and the story structure, I guess, is almost like cooking a meal. You can eat a steak raw, you can eat vegetables raw, but if you really want it to be memorable and you really want it to entice the palate, and be something you want to come back for over and over again, you might want to do some preparation. And I think that's where structure comes into play. But I'm sure we'll get more into that as we go into the first story.
In my pea-sized brain, who was the first that decided a story could be written? When did humans decide to document their creativity in a tangible way? Hi, I'm Fig Tree. Welcome home. I'm an archaeologist, and today we're talking about the Epic of Gilgamesh.
You had to admit, though, I mean, and granted, Gilgamesh was probably an oral story, very much like the Iliad and the Odyssey, and many of the other early narratives were definitely oral before they were written down. In fact, I believe, my personal belief is that the Bible, most of the Bible, especially the Old Testament, was probably oral tradition first and foremost. It probably wasn't even until the New Testament that you might have considered any of those. That's when you get letters, written letters being sent to people. And so they were written first. But I mean, especially those Old Testament stories, I think that it would probably behoove us to have a Bible series. Actually, this is a shoot the moon. I got so much money I can just do whatever the f I want to do. Is maybe hire really great actors to tell, like on film, orally recite the biblical stories in a theatrical way that an orator would, because I think that there's certain things that we try to read in the Bible that will turn off a lot of people because they weren't meant to be read, they were meant to be performed. And that's my 2 cents. But suffice to say, Gilgamesh, while written, was probably first and foremost an oral thing. And boy, do you structure, if you're passing a story down from generation to generation, that structure has to be tight for it to be to stand the game of telephone that is intergenerational or cross generational, I should say, retellings. That is these stories have to at the very least resonate for them to last as long as they have, or to have gotten to a point where somebody could stop and write them down.
These are 3D glasses that I poked the lens out of when I was 9 years old. 5,500 years ago, today, the world began to write. It was the Sumerians, of course.
Big mistake.
Who else? The Sumerians developed a method of writing called cuneiform, which was achieved by pressing different wedge-shaped symbols into clay. It came about kind of purely from a bureaucratic need to document things like...
As most things do. We had a bureaucratic need to get to the moon, and look at us now with our iPhones.
Administration, trade, income, all that boring shit. And it wasn't until 500 years...
It's the boring stuff that leads to the tools to create the interesting stuff. It's like, I don't know, the entire history of, non-linear video editing, but I'm sure that it was done... Obviously, it was done for the creative pursuits, but it had to be done in a very boring method and created in a very boring way, and in order for it to today work for very creative reasons. I'm not sure where I was going with that. Let's continue the video.
After its creation, that this writing system was used to record more religious and artistic things. As time goes on, the Sumerian written language grows and evolves and is soon able to record large accounts of legends, like that of Enmerkar and the Lord of Arata, in which the creation of writing itself is actually documented. So, although...
So freaking cool. Imagine a song that was about the creation of sound and the formation of music. Radiohead. I think I Have Your Song Swung concept album right there. And if it's not you, it's, Tame Impala, The Flaming Lips.
This is a legend and is thus a fictionalized account. This is still such a beautiful moment where we see the society that created the written word recounting in writing the moment that it happened. In it, there is a messenger who goes to the Lord of Kulaba to deliver a spoken message, and he's tasked with bringing one back. But he's so goddamn tired after delivering this message that the king writes it down for him instead. The king's speech was substantial and its contents extensive. The messenger, whose mouth was heavy and tired, was not able to repeat it. The Lord of Kulaba patted some clay and wrote the message as if on a tablet. Until then, there had been no putting words on clay. Now, under that sun and on that day, it was indeed so. Well, shit. With writing established...
Amazing work, guys. You delivered. I did not realize that had happened, that y'all wrote down the inception of writing things down. You recorded it. Congratulations.
As a poetic medium through which you could explore, all things integral to humanity, God, love, food, the universe. It became quite evident in Sumerian culture, and we see many hymns and poems and laments written in the Sumerian language. The Epic of Gilgamesh is an ancient Sumerian tale, arguably the first of its kind, the first story ever written. It began, of course, as a spoken story passed down through generations. It is a beautifully exquisite weaving together friendship and sacrifice and man and God and mortality, themes that have evidently burdened humanity since our beginning. It was around 2100 BC, someone decided to write this oral story down for the first time in Sumerian cuneiform. And the first iteration of this story actually took place over 5 poems and centered on the hero Gilgamesh. A lot of these...
Wait, Gilgamesh? Wait, was she just pranking on us because she mispronounced it? I think she was just pranking. She's just pranking. She's having a laugh.
Poems are quite fragmentary and lack that typical sort of plot development from poem to poem that you would come to expect from a sequential story. But the tale was a very well-known one at the time and was like a big part of popular culture in Sumer. And centuries later, when the Akkadian Empire was expanding through the region, we get the same story written down in the Akkadian language. This is when Gilgamesh becomes Gilgamesh. Now, this first Akkadian version
I see what happened there.
often referred to as the Old Babylonian version of the text, and quite a few tablets of this version have survived. Our most complete version of the text in its final form, and what most people refer to when they refer to the Epic of Gilgamesh, appears at around 1300 BC and is called the Standard Babylonian Version. It is also referred...
That's very much sounds like how a Bible translation is titled. Just yet again, there's something about the ancient world and the fact that it has to kind of like, I guess the ancient world has to go through the gateway of academia in some ways in order to be delivered upon us. It kind of gets that sort of like very formal treatment and titling
by its incipit or its opening line, "He who saw the deep." Like I said, there are different versions of this text, and older versions, including the Old Babylonian version, have a different incipit, begin with a different opening line. And this opening line and the change made of this opening line is actually quite integral to the entire theme of the poem and the way that it changes throughout the different versions that we have of it. In the past, the opening line was "surpassing all other kings," referencing Gilgamesh. He is surpassing all other kings. He's the best. He's the best of the kings. The opening...
And what we usually like to see in our fiction, especially when there is little fiction, is for the fiction to be about the greatest of people. But what you said there about the inception, it really does make me want to go grab something, which is my translation of the Bible. And when I see my translation of the Bible, what I mean is it's the like NRSV. What does that mean again? Probably going to edit some of this down. New Revised Standard Version Catholic Edition is what that means. Oh, I got some water on this thing. But I think that it's important because most people would think that the first line of Genesis is "in the beginning" or something like that. In the beginning, there was God. I forget. But I think it's a very distinct, and this is like one of the reasons I got this translation of the Bible, because of this opening line, which is, "In the beginning, when God created the heavens and the earth was formless, void, and darkness covered the face of the deep, while a wind from God swept over the face of the waters." That's the first sentence in this translation. But I think it was the fact that it said the "when" is very important, because it almost creates this idea that it began with God creating. It's such a nuanced thing, but that little nuance, let me go and find, what was it, maybe Genesis, New King James. Sorry, this is a little side quest, I guess. "In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. The earth was without form and void, and darkness was on the face of the deep. And the Spirit of God was hovering over the face of the waters." So, like that, just that one word of "when God created," in the beginning, when God created, and this is "in the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth." I don't know. It's hard to explain exactly why that change is so important, but it does speak to me that it began with creation instead of from a poetic standpoint, instead of it beginning that God created. It's like it like gives you the sense that God existed and then created, versus it's just all of a sudden like kind of hits like if all the symphony played at the same time, like bah, like quiet to every instrument hitting at once, versus I think that this version feels more like you heard everything tuning up before you started reading that first line, and then the first line is like like everything else was formless, and then the first line is like the first chair violinist just starting to play a solo, like beginning with a solo. Well, that's my opinion on it. But it shows how important grammar is, and written word, and how there can be differences in all these religious and religious tales and religious sects on like just single words and passages. All right, let's get back to the video.
Line of our version that we're going to be talking about, the standard Babylonian version, also refers to Gilgamesh, but it calls him he who saw the deep. There's a bit of a difference there, and we'll get into it later.
I think that is such a metal difference. He who saw the deep. It's like I'm sure she said she's going to get into it, but what I interpret from that here from the get-go is, instead of surpassing other kings, like what surpasses other kings, and it's like especially back then, it's like your ability for foresight and your ability to see more, to understand more, and thus be able to make better decisions and lead people, or triumph. So he who saw the deep. I don't know. Let's see what she has to say about it.
But essentially, one holds him to the standard of king by virtue of his inherent heroism that we don't really question. The other imbues him with some sort of intelligence, some sort of knowledge that hasn't been achieved by other people. He saw into the deep. What is the deep? We'll get into it. But I just want to point that out because when I talk about it later, I want
we all have a New York accent somewhere within us
to have said something about it. Anyway, should we just get into it? I'm going to give you a little rundown of the story. By little rundown, I mean it's going to be quite a long rundown. Let's start with tablet 1.
All right. You ready, guys?
The epic opens on the description of our god-man Gilgamesh. Who is there that can be compared with him in kingly status and can say, like Gilgamesh, it is I am the king? Gilgamesh was his name from the day he was born. 2/3 of him god, but 1/3 of him human.
You would think those numbers would be reversed. It would be 2/3 human, 1/3 god, or one half and one half. Interesting. Like, I would not have taken that as the role. 2/3 god, 1/3 human. So it's almost like he is, it's almost like, I wonder how that compares to most people's interpretation of Jesus. Like how much God is Jesus versus human. It also depends on your version of Jesus, like the Last Temptation of Christ. That's like a 2/3 human, 1/3 God split on Jesus, versus I'm trying to think of another recent enough Jesus adaptation that I've seen, which I haven't seen that many actually, now that I think about it. Well, let's just say I haven't seen the show, but the way The Chosen seems to depict Jesus from afar, and I should get more into it, that one seems like they're going for the more like he's mostly a human, sorry, this is derailing, but yeah, it's just an interesting makeup of God to human for a story. Like Hercules maybe is the other example I should be looking at, which would probably be considered a 1/2 human, 1/2 God.
Wow. And he acts like it. He terrorizes his city of Uruk, not out of malevolence necessarily, but out of what seems to be this insatiable sense of desire and power. He's unlike man in a lot of ways. He can't really exist on their level. His mother is the goddess Nisun, and his father was a deified king. So he's got this demigod kind of status going on. And
dude, his father rizzed up a goddess? Damn, brother. Oh, this guy's got like mad like ego going on. His dad attained, his dad got so high up in the hierarchy of humanity that the only way for his son to surpass him was for him to bang a goddess, and then his son being half god, or 2/3 god, I should say, because I guess his dad had achieved, by achieving the heights he got to, he essentially was half god himself, half human. So then take a full god plus a half god, I guess that makes 2/3 of a god. For Gilgamesh. But damn, this guy would be a terror. Think about like such a nepo baby.
Has no equal. There is no man who can compare to him. While he is described as a little bit of a tyrant, we also do get some positive attributes in that he built the city walls surrounding Uruk, and he is drop dead gorgeous. He built the wall of Uruk. Go up onto the wall of Uruk and walk around. Survey the foundation platform. Inspect the brickwork. See if its brickwork is not kiln-fired brick, and if the 7 sages did not lay its foundations. And in doing so, he not only built the walls of the city protecting the city, but he built the walls of the city and created the civilization and the society and the life within it. He's strong and he's powerful and he's heroic. But still,
I think that's very important. And I think that we're going to something we're going to get into is what actually makes a hero. And I think often it's thought of as like a great warrior, but honestly, like this hero is much more. I think the greatest achievers in humanity are the architects, honestly, and people who work with building and turning nature into a habitat for humanity and others. I don't know. I just think that that's actually the greatest creation man can do. Violence is like almost anti-creation in some ways. Force. It's almost like our most barbaric way of being that I think even got we fetishize and fantasize about, but it's like I think we do that to create a formality around it in order to separate it from its true more base nature that I think we don't want to you know let be barren by itself. There's something bigger here now that I'm talking out loud, but I do think that there's the reason the reason people are gun nuts and the reason the military is so formal is almost to create some sort of civilization, a civility to the barbaric nature of applied force.
His people suffer. He tires them out and he exerts all their energy. It's implied that he does this through acts of sexual conquest or perhaps through the contests and like athletic competitions. This characterization of Gilgamesh is quite a truthful reflection of what we know of Babylonian kings. Hammurabi and Nebuchadnezzar II made copious demands of their subjects, and this portrayal of Gilgamesh probably mirrors the way that Babylonian people felt the ambitions of a powerful king can bring down a sort of tyranny on their people. So glad we don't have to worry about that anymore. But it's clear that his behavior is deemed unkingly, and it's an issue. So much of an issue, in fact, that the mother goddess Aruru is tasked with creating a counterpart to engage the energies of Gilgamesh. Someone's got to put a leash on him. And so Enkidu is created from clay, as the first men were. He comes to life fully grown, not having been born.
That feels very much if you ever watched the OG Power Rangers, it just reminds me of the putties and all the monsters they had to fight were made by whoa. Oh, shoot. I jumped way too far ahead. Were made versions of the text. Shit. Okay, here. I think that's about where we were. Okay, sorry. But it's just like, I wonder if they intentionally took that imagery of the clay monster being put into an oven in order to create the monster that the Power Rangers had to face off against, if they consciously took that from Gilgamesh, or if it's just such a inherent human like imagery of creation that it just sort of like they came to the same conclusion as these people so long ago.
He's created from clay, as the first men were. He comes to life fully grown, not having been born, without a mother's cries. He's created in silence in the forest. And he lives in an animal state. He's hairy, he's unclothed, he's ungoverned by presumably human worries.
He sounds a little bit like a minotaur, maybe a centaur, somewhere, some cross between a minotaur and a centaur. I mean, I'm betting this is a wise guy, a great warrior and a wise man.
And thoughts of family or of the gods or his wider social identity. Sounds like a vibe. He feeds with the gazelles on grass and water, and the poem compares him explicitly to these first men, dwelling far removed from civilization before the installation of sedentary society, which, as we know, the Sumerians were the first to do. Aruru washed her hands. She took a pinch of clay. She threw it down in the wild. In the wild she created Enkidu, the hero, an offspring of silence. All his body is matted with hair. He knows not at all a people, nor even a country. Feeding on grass with the very gazelles, jostling at the waterhole with the herd, he enjoyed the water with the animals. The Sumerians, as the first people to have transitioned from a hunter-gatherer society to a sedentary one, are showing the importance they put on civilization and society in this one character's introduction. It's clear they really value this transition, even though it would have taken place thousands of years ago at the point of this epic being written. It is something that is playing in their mind. They're distinguishing themselves from animals and from these earlier men.
I'm sure that all they had to do was go outside their city walls to see the earlier men, people still living as those earlier men. I'm sure they were very hoity-toity about it back in the day, just like we are with other countries that we think are living a more primitive lifestyle, and how we think we're bringing them, modernity and freedom. Like that's like that's not a curse in disguise. But I think that would probably be the exchange you make, and it's the exchange we still make to this day. It's like, do you go out and live that primitive hunter-gatherer lifestyle and have more, but maybe more freedom, but also a lot less comfort? Or do you sacrifice, to modernity, have more comfort, but at the same time also have to deal with, the whims of, the hierarchy of the leadership, and having, this divinity, this divine leader, be able to, through his own will, determine the outcomes of your life day to day, especially if his eye settles upon you, or the system's eye settles upon you for whatever reason. And once the system decides, I'm gonna sound like a big old conspiracy nut, but seriously, if our current system decides that you're a problem, it has every ability to demonstrate you as being a problem, and thus at the worst, or at the least, like kind of socially exiling you, and at the worst, like putting you in like a pretty much prison. So just something to consider. The exchange that we make, and the difference is like the first people got to choose the exchange. We were born into the exchange, and it's really hard to go off the grid when you're born into it.
He was raised by animals, he thinks like one, he acts like one, until he's discovered by a hunter. The hunter comes across him in the wild and is shocked at this sight of this man who is in the shape of a man but is acting like an animal. He realizes that Enkidu is the reason he's been having some issues. His traps and his snares have all been broken by this creature, and now he's realizing that Enkidu is the creature. He goes to his dad and is like, "Dad, what do I do about this wild man in the forest?" And the old man concocts a genius plan that honestly would not have crossed my mind. He tells the hunter to go into the city of Uruk, grab a prostitute, and bring her back with him so that her charms may lure Enkidu away from this animalistic life. And this
Bro, sorry, ma'am, Fig Tree. I think the reason you didn't come up with that plan, well, this, was because that's a very masculine coded plan. Like, I might come up with that plan, but even I'm probably too feminine in this day and age to think that way. I mean, let's just be glad that he decided to make it a prostitute instead of, I don't, a non, just a pretty girl. Like, at least this lady's getting paid for her services in taming this wild beast man.
So the hunter goes into the city, meets this prostitute named Samhat, and the two go back to the waterhole. The gazelles come to drink at the waterhole, and Enkidu is of course among them. The hunter encourages Samhat to use the tricks of her trade to seduce Enkidu, which she does. Enkidu and Samhat lay with...
Yeah, I mean, whom amongst us would not be seduced?
Each other for one entire week.
Damn, bro.
Sexual appetite, I suppose, is like the rest of him. It's animalistic. And there's perhaps a bit of intentional comedy in this scene and in the exaggeration and hyperbole of it all. When Enkidu is finally satisfied, he turns once again to rejoin the animals. He's like, all right, that was fun. Let's head on. But he can't. He's no longer one of them. He's lost some crucial innocence.
Ooh, the apple in the Garden of Eden. Another link. There's probably going to be a lot of comparisons to be made to the Bible here, to the Old Testament especially.
He's seen as human, and the animals fear him. The gazelles saw Enkidu and they started running. The animals of the wild moved away from his person. Enkidu had defiled his body so pure. His legs stood still, though his herd was on the move. Enkidu was diminished. His running was not as before, but he had reason. He was wide of understanding. At the same time, he is...
Damn, dude. Pussy so good it got you excommunicated from, like, the animal kingdom? Holy smokes.
Gained some broader knowledge. He has reason. He's human. He sacrificed an animalistic kind of peace for a human intelligence. The concept of defilement through sexual experience is one that appears throughout human history and aligns with this seemingly widespread human belief that sexual knowledge brings the end of innocence. It's fascinating to be able to trace this back to literally the first story ever written. This moment also obviously kind of parallels the fall of man. Enkidu is fashioned from clay by the gods, like Adam and Eve. And just like Adam and Eve, he forsakes his purity in discovering his sexuality. They fall out of the grace of God, but in doing...
And remember, this is the first written story. I mean, I'm not sure where Adam and Eve, the Garden of Eden, Genesis in general, I'm not sure where the timeline is on a literary standpoint. But you have to imagine one's probably cribbing from another. Everything's a remix. Is Genesis just, is this Flash Gordon and Genesis is Star Wars? I don't know. Or let's get it. Let's just keep going. Let's see if she touches on this history more.
So are actually able to fully embrace their humanity. It's a sacrifice that's inevitable in this thematic. Humanity must be achieved, but to do so, purity must be lost. It's just, you can't, they're mutually exclusive. So yeah. Shamhat says to Enkidu that she's going to take him back to Uruk and he can meet Gilgamesh. And Enkidu, only just having become human, he's a little bit traumatized. He's desperate for a friend, an equal. Sounds like someone else we know. Despite this, though, given Shamhat's explanation of Gilgamesh as a tyrant, Enkidu intends to arrive in Uruk and beat the shit out of him. She warns him that Gilgamesh is really...
Jeez. What else are we going to do? Like, whom amongst us, young men in this audience, are some men who used to be young? You get like that self-awareness, and the things that kind of come first with it are wanting to get laid and wanting to overthrow the system. At least that was true for me as well. This is just repeating forever. You become aware, and then there's women out there, and there's injustice. And you know what? If I overthrow that injustice, maybe that prostitute who let me have her for a week down at the lake will give me another row now that I've built back up and I'm hungry again. I don't know.
Strong, and that he's also the sun god's favorite, so to challenge him would be an act of blasphemy. Not only this, but the gods have also arranged for Gilgamesh to have a little two-dream premonition moment of an enemy's arrival, so he's going to be prepared metaphysically. Back in Uruk, we see that Gilgamesh does in fact have a couple dreams. He wakes up and he comes to his mother in a state of confusion and tells her about his dreams. "Oh mother, the dream that I saw in the course of this night, the stars of the heavens appeared before me. Like lumps of rock from the sky, they kept falling towards me. I picked one up, but it was too much for me. I kept trying to roll it, but I could not dislodge it. The land of Uruk was standing around it. A crowd was jostling before it. They were kissing its feet like little babies. I loved it like a wife, and I caressed and embraced it. I picked it up and set it down at your feet, and you made it my equal."
See, this is why I have a little bit of trouble with older texts. What the hell? Kissing? They were kissing its feet like a little baby. What? I have never had reproduced. I haven't reproduced yet. I haven't had a baby of my own. Do we kiss babies' feet? I can imagine kissing their forehead, maybe kissing their little hand. Beautiful, cute. Why are you kissing a baby's feet? They were kissing its feet like it's. And then I loved it like a wife, and caressed and embraced it. This, oh mother, I dreamed I saw the course. In the course of the night, stars and heavens appear before me, and like lumps of rock from the sky. He's talking like about meteorites or something. He's talking about like caressing it and then presenting it to his mother and kissing its feet like a baby. Okay, let's see if we clear this up.
His mother, as many mothers are, is wonderful at interpreting dreams and tells him, "A mighty companion will come to you, the savior of his friend. He is the mightiest in the land. His strength is as mighty as a lump of rock from the sky. You will love him like a wife, caressing and embracing him. He, being mighty, will often save you. Favorable and precious was your dream." Oh.
Just saying, is this our first hetero life partnership or something here? Our first homoerotic life partnership? These guys are about to be big bros. Imagine the Carl Weathers, Arnold Schwarzenegger, hand clap about to happen.
So in the first dream, what's often interpreted as a meteorite has fallen to the ground, and Gilgamesh tries to pick it up, but it's too heavy. He can't budge it, and a crowd gathers around it in awe. He manages to bring it back to his mother, who makes it his equal, and his mother predicts that this means the coming of a friend who Gilgamesh will love like a wife and who will save him. The second dream is very similar to the first, but instead of a meteorite, Gilgamesh sees an axe lying in the street. Again, it's the center of the crowd's attention. He loves it as he would love a wife. He takes it to his mother makes it his equal.
I don't think this guy understands how to love a wife. If you're loving meteorites and axes like your wife. I know this is a dream to be interpreted, but still, this is so weird to me that they're so quick to say I'm going to love this thing as a wife, because it just does not compute for me. Maybe I'm the autistic one here, probably.
And she also interprets this dream as meaning that a friend will come and it will be his savior. As the text continues in the second tablet, we really mark Enkidu's transition into humanity. Shamhat clothes him in some of her garments. Shepherds offer him bread and beer. At first, he simply just doesn't know how to respond. How to eat bread, he had never even been taught. How to drink ale, Enkidu did not know. He's never encountered human food or drink before. In earlier versions of the text, Shamhat encourages him to drink, and he promptly becomes drunk and starts singing. Very human. This part marks his transformation from beast to man. A barber shaves off his coat of animal hair. He uses scented oil to perfume his body in the Babylonian fashion. And with each human luxury that he experiences, he sheds a part of his animalistic past. But to truly fulfill his destiny, he needs to go from the wild to the city. The city, again, as an urban center, is incredibly important in this Babylonian understanding of civilization. Arriving in the city of Uruk, Enkidu hears of a wedding that's going down, and that Gilgamesh intends to go to the wedding and deflower the bride before the groom has a chance to consummate the marriage.
Boo! There's prima donna, I think it's called.
Which is not very kosher.
No.
And Enkidu is enraged by this, and so he stands in the doorway of the house where the ceremony is taking place, and he bars Gilgamesh from entering. He blocks his way. In line...
This sounds like, just saying, like they call this the Epic of Gilgamesh, but this seems like the Song of Enkidu, if you were to ask me right now. It seems like he's much more the bro of the story. Gilgamesh is kind of like an asshole at this point, but he is the architect of the city, so... And like I say, I always try to say, you got to compare things to the standards of the time. So obviously this is something kings were doing that the people were not in favor of, and thus they had to create a hero that could stand up to a king and say this is not correct. All right.
That echo Gilgamesh's dream, a crowd starts to form around Enkidu, admiring and in awe of him. And then our two heroes finally duke it out in the streets of Uruk.
Hell yeah.
They fight so hard that the ground rumbles and the doors of the houses nearby shake on their hinges. But for once in both of their lives, each of them has an equal. Enkidu eventually submits to Gilgamesh's authority, and as it was predicted, the two make friends, finally presented with another who can rival them in strength and divinity. Gilgamesh himself being 2 parts god, 1 part human, and Enkidu having been created by the gods, they share this kind of divinity that no other man can really hope to attain. Gilgamesh introduces his new best friend to his mom, and is clearly...
As bros are to do. Like, it's like you could imagine interpretation of this where Gilgamesh is actually just like a little kid this entire time. I mean, aside from, deflowering the bride to be and, but it feels like aside from his sexual side, this is all very much like the imaginations of a child. Like, I built this city and everybody has to play as I say they do. It reminds me of the kid from that Twilight Zone episode, that gets his way and has like complete mind control over people and they're terrified of him, more than it reminds me of like a real adult, character. Even to the point where he has to go and mom, I met somebody new. It's very coded, and makes us wonder makes me wonder if we have also reached higher levels of maturation through our time. Like, is he at the highest level of maturation of the era, or are they specifically writing him to be like a young child at this point, so that way as the story goes on he matures emotionally? Because it's so strange that I don't get the vibe that this Gilgamesh is also the one who built the city. I'd get it if his father built the city, the demigod, and now Gilgamesh is living in the shadows. See, that's the modern day rewrite I would do. It's like Gilgamesh's dad was so great that he built the walls of the city, and Gilgamesh is the inheritor of the walls, but he hasn't done his great thing yet. He hasn't found out what he's meant to do, but all he knows is that he's very capable but lacks vision, something like that. So here we go. The page 1 rewrite on the Epic of Gilgamesh, starting now.
quite infatuated with him. He is the mightiest in the land. His strength is as mighty as a lump of rock from the sky. Tall in stature, majestic as a battlement. So his mom, not reading the room at all, straight up just tells Enkidu to his face how weird she thinks he is. And the fact that it was strange that he was birthed in silence without a mother and has no family, to which Enkidu is immediately reduced to tears. And Gilgamesh tries to comfort him. They took hold of each other, and Gilgamesh to Enkidu, he said a word, saying, "Why, my friend, did your eyes fill with tears?" Enkidu said to him, "My friend, my heart was made to ache. Through sobbing, terror has entered my heart." In an effort to distract Enkidu from his misery, Gilgamesh proposes that the two of them go for a little adventure to the cedar forest. The cedar forest is a very faraway place, visited only at the greatest peril.
Just want to say nice graphics, good typography. Not. Got her.
It's not an entirely mythical location. We can actually place the cedar forest in actual real life geography. Various versions also refer to it as the land of Ebla, which would be in modern day Lebanon. So there we go. It's a real place. You can go there, but not anymore actually, and you'll find out why. Humbaba is the guardian of the cedar forest. He was appointed by the god Enlil, and he is a powerful beast of a creature. And Gilgamesh suggests that the two of them go and just fuck him up. This doesn't really cheer Enkidu.
This is a story for the boys. Like, it's like, we can't fuck each other up. We're equals. Let's go fuck up a god. Hell yeah, brother. I am like, no wonder this was like the most popular story, like the first story to be written down, because it's for the boys.
Up too much, because he warns Gilgamesh that Humbaba is really strong and a lethal enemy, to which Gilgamesh calls him a little bitch and tells him to live a little. "Why, my friend, do you speak like a weakling? With your feeble talk you vex my heart. As for man, his days are numbered. All that he ever did is but dust." He wants to make a name for himself. Gilgamesh wants to leave some kind of legacy, and he convinces Enkidu that this is a worthwhile task as well. And so off they go. Tablets 3 and 4 are quite short and sort of just encompass them preparing to go on their expedition. Let's jump to tablet 5.
Filler arc. Let's see. Yeah, defying the gods. Yeah, this is where it gets good.
In which the pair make it to the forest, and they meet its terrifying guardian, Humbaba. And so begin in earnest Gilgamesh's constant and continuous affronts to the gods and to godliness itself. Humbaba runs his mouth about how Gilgamesh should not be cavorting with the spawn of a fish who knew not his father, Enkidu. Now, these two are bros plus a little extra, so Gilgamesh is ready to fight, to defend bro's honor. The battle begins and is so intense, these three divine beings unleashing all of their power, that it splits the sea.
Oh, this sounds like Dragon Ball Z shit here. Boys, why hasn't there been an anime? If there is an anime, let's watch it together, guys. This is some real like just lore.
The forest in half, creating the mountain ranges of Lebanon and anti-Lebanon. That's why those are there. Battle continues until the sun god Shamash sends down 13 winds to disorient and blind Humbaba. Shamash, he's the sun god. He is quite fond of our hero Gilgamesh. He's his little favorite, right? So this disorients him enough for Gilgamesh to strike the final blow, which he does. The great fearsome Humbaba is reduced to pleading for his life, willing to become Gilgamesh's servant just to stay alive.
Actually, this should be a Souls-like game. Already, like this boss fight that just happened, multi-phase boss fight. Hell yeah.
That doesn't work. He goes to Enkidu and he pleads with him to please change Gilgamesh's mind. Let him save me. Now, Enkidu obviously has no interest in keeping this guy alive. He was just being extremely rude to him earlier. So he tells Gilgamesh to hurry up and kill him and to do it quickly, because he suspects that when the god Enlil finds out what happened here, he's not going to be too pleased. He's the one who appointed Humbaba as the guardian of the forest, if you recall. In fact, Enkidu anticipates that all the gods are going to be pretty angry at what they've done, even Shamash, who helped them win the battle. Drunk with victory, Enkidu seems to have completely discarded the respect for the gods that made him such a worthy opponent to Gilgamesh in the first couple tablets. It's clear that he is also buying into this idea of eternal fame by way of glory. We have a special name for this kind of ego and affrontation to the gods in the business. This is called hubris. And not to spoil the...
Oh, is that where we get it from? All my favorite characters have hubris. Anakin Skywalker. Let's see, who else? Homer Simpson. Let's see. Let's say John McClane. He's not really hubristic. Iron Man, hubris. What makes heroes? You can't spell hero without hubris.
5,000-year-old poem, but hubris never ends well for the Hubri. With Humbaba's dying breath, he curses our
Spoilers.
heroes. May the pair of them not grow old. Apart from his friend Gilgamesh, may Enkidu have nobody to bury him. Weird and ominous. That will be relevant soon. The implication for Enkidu here is that he will remain without family. He was born without family. Turns out he's going to stay that way. He will have no one except his friend to look after his funeral rites and burial. Anyway, the two god-defying heroes take off on a raft from the scene of the crime and are sailing on the water.
Just want to say this Gilgamesh guy
When
seems like a bad influence on a Kibru, if that's his name. It seems like we got ourselves this good little lad who just wanted to, put some, social justice into this world and get some of that good old strange. And now he's rolling with a bad kid who wants to go and kill gods. Now, I don't think he signed up. He didn't really mean to sign up for this. He just, he just got seduced by the bros.
The patron goddess of the city of Uruk, a goddess
look at those tatas
of love and war, spots them. And she's immediately taken by Gilgamesh.
Wait, the goddess of love and war, that is an amazing combo. That just truly shows, like, I guess that would be like white mana and red mana in Magic, a Plains Islands goddess. Or not Plains Islands, Plains Mountains goddess, but still, that is, you don't think those two go together, but you'd be surprised.
And wishes to marry him. Maybe you shouldn't hear about his brutal affront towards the gods, I don't know. The lady Ishtar looked covetously on the beauty of Gilgamesh. Come, Gilgamesh, you be the bridegroom. Grant me your fruits, I insist. You shall be my husband, and I will be your wife. Her words in this little scene play on the conventional verba solemnia of a marriage proposal. She speaks as if she were a young man courting her betrothed. So it's a little bit of subverting the narrative there. She tries to win his heart with the promise of gifts and offers to even send him a personal war chariot pulled by lion monsters. She also says that when you come into our house, doorway and throne shall kiss your feet. The very structure of her home, the furniture itself, will welcome Gilgamesh as he enters her home, which is a level of devotion that I require at any and all times. Now get ready for this essay. Gilgamesh opened his mouth to speak, saying to the lady Ishtar, "If indeed I were to take you in marriage, will you feed me bread fit for a god? Will you pour me ale fit for a king? Who would take you in marriage? You that does not solidify, ice, an Arkabinu door that does not block breeze and drought, a palace that massacres its warriors, a water skin that wets him who carries it, a shoe that bites the foot of its owner. What bridegroom of yours endured forever? What brave warrior of yours is there who went up to heaven? Come, let me count the numbers of your lovers. And would you love me and change me as you did them?"
Whoa. Bro is calling her a skank? The god of love and war? He's just like straight up calling her out as like a hussy? This guy, the balls on this Gilgamesh guy, I don't know. It seems, I wonder if this hubris is going to come back and bite him.
So that was Gilgamesh rejecting Ishtar's marriage proposal via lengthy and absolute...
He looks like he's a paladin who's like doing turn undead. He's like smiting her. That is beautiful art, though. Great pull. Fig Tree, I'm really appreciating this video.
Scathing monologue. He's very aware that marriage to Ishtar would not be typical by any means, her being a goddess and all that. He just wouldn't be able to handle it. The marriage would surely lack the comforts that one would expect from marrying a woman. Feeding him, clothing him, taking care of him, being a mother, a wife. In his eyes, he can't imagine why anyone would choose to marry Ishtar. Why would they, when she's had such an array of lovers in the past, whose fates have always ended up kind of a little bit unfavorably? He lists all of her various love affairs, kind of a dog move, but he also lists how they all ended terribly. Her first love, she left brokenhearted. He lists an array of bestial affairs she seems to have had. The Alalu bird, whose wing Ishtar broke, leading to his characteristic call. The lion, whose fate is to be hunted with traps. And the horse, which is broken in for the service of men. She was in love with a shepherd, who she ended up turning into a wolf, and then he was chased by his own dogs.
What? It's like she created a werewolf?
So you see the You see the issue here, right?
Mhm.
And Gilgamesh asks her, if she were to love him, how can he be expected to be treated any differently? Fair. After being exposed to this long and truthful barrage of abuse, Ishtar understandably reacts with anger. She runs off to her parents. Her father, with all the grace and conviction of man, says, but did you not provoke King Gilgamesh? Thanks for your input, sir. This does little to tame the forest of indignation coursing through Ishtar's blood at this point, so she pleads with her father, "O father, give me please the bull of heaven, that I may slay Gilgamesh in his dwelling. If you will not give me the bull of heaven, I shall smash the underworld together with its dwelling place. I shall raise the nether regions to the ground. I shall bring up the dead to consume the living. I shall make the dead outnumber the living."
What was that about? Hell, no fury as the like a woman scorn. I'm probably saying that wrong, but I feel like this is the first written record of that. Like some things never change. That's why I'm so foundational in my thinking. It's like we have been the same people for thousands upon thousands of years. Ever since we could write, we were already solidified into being the people we are. And that includes when bros write stories for other bros, we make sure to let them know this is what happens if you fuck with the hose in the wrong way. Hose mad. We've said it thousands, millions of different ways throughout all of our history. But it comes down to the same thing over and over again. If you cross a woman, if you scorn a woman, your life is going to be hell. She will see to it. And now she's going to her dad to ask for the bull of heaven. I think I've had the bull of heaven rain upon me in my own way.
The bull of heaven, identified by the constellation Taurus, shout out to my Tauruses, it's almost your time, is a heavenly animal with which Ishtar wishes to kill Gilgamesh. If she doesn't get the bull, she threatens to release all the dead from the underworld so that they come up to the world of the living and consume the living. Gotta say, I like her style. That's hardcore. The threat of the rising dead is actually quite a common fear that is tackled in Babylonian
I like this fig tree lady. I could fix her.
Literature, and it's clearly pretty freaking terrifying because Anu relents, allowing our favorite Nepo baby complete and utter control over this celestial beast of a creature. She leads the bull of heaven down to Uruk, where its fiery presence alone withers all the vegetation and evaporates the water from the rivers. Each snort of its breath opens up a huge pit in the earth where hundreds of people are just falling through, including Enkidu. Is Hubaba's curse coming true? No. He's unreasonably large, so he climbs right back out and he wrestles the bull by the horns. And he manages to overpowering it using a technique that we can actually see replicated in Babylonian art. He holds down the tail while pushing down on the hook of the hoof of the bull of the leg. While Enkidu holds the bull in this position, Gilgamesh stabs it in the neck and kills it.
Yeah, okay. Mission 2, boss fight 2 of the video game.
The boys are at it again, killing divine beasts. And our two lovely boys hold a banquet in honor of their victory, not over just the bull of heaven, but over the goddess Ishtar herself. Enkidu wakes the morning after the party full of dread. Been there. He had a dream. In it, he saw all the gods absolutely furious about our little heroes killing Humbaba and also the bull of heaven. That's 2 strikes.
Yeah.
Okay, 3 strikes.
You can tell the video quality is already downgraded so much. This is how bad my internet is here. This is why I haven't started streaming yet.
And you're out. Except if you're in Kinno, it's 2 strikes and you're out. They decide that as punishment for these offenses, one of the pair must die. Enlil says it must be Enkidu. As Gilgamesh was listening to the words of Enkidu.
What? Okay. Why? Like I said, you get rid of Gilgamesh and Kindu is just going to be, going to become a good guy. It's Gilgamesh's influence on Enkidu. But I'm sure they have the reasons they're about to get into, but I would think it'd be the opposite. But then again, you can't really kill a king and expect the kingdom to, not fall into chaos or something.
His friend, swiftly and soon his tears were flowing. Gilgamesh opened his mouth to speak, saying to Enkidu, "Why, my friend, did your heart talk profanities? Though there is much fear, the dream was precious. To the ones who survived, grieving was left. The deceased left sorrow to the ones who survived." After hearing about Enkidu's dream, Gilgamesh is distraught, saying that the pain of death is not the pain of the deceased, but it's the sorrow that is left behind to the living. And he is so full of sorrow knowing that his friend will soon be dead. In what I can only describe as a spiral of anxiety, Gilgamesh just starts rattling off ideas of how he can convince the gods to keep Enkidu alive. He's like, I'm going to make a sick-ass golden statue in your likeness. I'm going to beg the gods. I'm going to plead with them, all of this. But Enlil has spoken, and his judgment can never be altered. Enkidu will die before his time. After all, he was cursed to never grow old. As dawn breaks, Enkidu watches his last sunrise on Earth with tears in his eyes, and he curses the hunter who first saw him in the wild and inadvertently brought him into the world of humanity, and so to his death. And he also curses the woman.
Just like I curse my mother and father every day for bringing me, putting me into this world just so I can be here and experience it and then eventually die. What a curse. And yeah, of course, you're going to curse the first woman you fall for, man. That's, I just see myself in these characters.
Lay with Shamhat. By seducing him in the wild, she deprived him of the strength and purity that he was created with. His anger and vitriol then is not aimed directly at the hunter or Shamhat, but at this painfully human feeling of loss of innocence, and even more so of needing to come to terms with one's own mortality, of being aware of death in a way that animals are not. Enkidu gained wisdom. He became human. He found an equal. But now everything that he gained can be lost. So fragile is the human condition. As Enkidu lies on his deathbed, he tells Gilgamesh of another dream he had the night before. Quite something, my friend, was the dream I saw during the course of this night. The heavens thundered, the earth responded, with me standing there between them. There was a man. His expression was grim. His face was like that of an Anzu bird. His hands were lion's paws, his claws an eagle's talons. He took hold of my hair. He was too strong for me. I struck him, so he sprang back like a skipping rope. He struck me and capsized me like a raft. Like a mighty wild bull, he trampled over me. Rescue me, my friend, I called to you. But you were afraid of him. He struck me. He turned me into a dove. He bound my arms like the wings of a bird to lead me captive to the house of darkness, to the house which those who enter cannot leave, on the journey whose way cannot be retraced, to the house whose residents are deprived of light, where dust is their sustenance, their food clay. Enkidu is describing his own death and his journey into the underworld. The monster he describes is an angel of death who overpowers Enkidu, and his cries of help go unheeded by a terrified Gilgamesh. It seems that we found the one thing that can strike fear into our divine hero, death. This angel of death turns Enkidu into a bird to take him into the underworld, which, sidebar, I'll say is actually quite an interesting little tidbit when you think about the Babylonian tradition and practice of clothing the dead in feathers. Kind of funky. Anyway, it's an
this is quite and this is where old narratives maybe yet again could use a little rewrite, but it just seems as though and tell me if I missed something in the comments. Maybe I missed a beat of this, but Enkidu woke up realizing that the gods were upset with him and decided that he's going to die, and then he just dies. Do you think that there would be some sort of conflict that this underworld god would come to them and they would have another fight, and that during that fight he would be taken, or maybe that, because like she said earlier, this underworld guy comes to them and Gilgamesh, and Enkidu hopes to stand up to him just like they've stand up to the other gods, but Gilgamesh turns and flees because he's too afraid of death, and thus Enkidu has to just surrender to him or something. But it almost feels like there's a lack of a beat here that I'm not quite grasping.
Moving and eerie insight into the world of the dead through the eyes of someone who is still living. The residents of the underworld see no light. Their existence is not exactly hellish, but it's kind of worse. It's dull. They survive off of dust and clay. After recounting his dream, the last of Enkidu's strength is depleted, and he lingers for 12 days on his deathbed. On the last day, he summons Gilgamesh one more time, and there's this beautiful passage where he compares his death, his spurring by the gods, to those who fall in battle. He speaks of this idea that a heroic death brings fame and glory, and in a way, everlasting life. But dying in one's bed brings nothing of the sort, and so Humbaba's curse comes true for Enkidu. This one's about pain. At the very first light of dawn, Gilgamesh was mourning for his friend. O Enkidu, whom your mother a gazelle and your father a wild donkey created, whom the wild asses reared with their milk, and the animals of the wild taught all the pastures. May the paths Enkidu of the cedar forest mourn you, and not by day or night. May the elders of the populous city of Uruk mourn you. May the holy Euphrates mourn you. Gilgamesh is mourning for Enkidu, and in doing so creates this horrifically heartbreaking lament for his friend, the literary structure of which is sort of presented as this crescendo of grief. He describes the effect of Enkidu's death on everyone, from this kind of wider circle of acquaintances, being just the people of Uruk, to the closest tortured anguish of his best friend. The mourners also include inanimate parts of the natural world, the paths of the cedar forest, the animals of the forest that knew him then mourn for him, and Gilgamesh mourns for him. I shall mourn Enkidu, my friend. Like a professional mourning woman, I shall lament bitterly. The axe at my side, in which my arm trusted, the sword of my belt, the shield in front of me. A wicked wind has risen up against me and robbed me. My friend Enkidu, a mule on the run, donkey of the uplands, panther of the wild. We it was who joined forces and climbed the uplands, seized the bull of heaven and killed it, destroyed Humbaba, who dwelt in the cedar forest. Now what sleep is it that has seized you? You have become unconscious and cannot hear me. But he would not lift his head. He felt his heart, but it was not beating any more. He covered his friend, veiling his face like a bride. Bro, why'd that get me like tearing up? In this lament, Enkidu is remembered as Gilgamesh's most treasured possession, a trusty weapon, a beautiful garment that has been taken from him by death, the invisible thief. We get what I must say is quite a beautiful
I was going to say, did that woman have her titties out at the funeral? Man, they were really wild out back then.
use of anaphora in these next few lines when Gilgamesh is going through the burial process, which he later says he only allowed to happen after 7 days and nights of weeping. I shall lay you out on a great bed. On a bed of honor I shall lay you out. I shall set you on a restful seat, the seat to my left. The princes of the earth will kiss your feet. I shall make weep for you the people.
More feet kissing. Yet again, nothing's new in this world. It seems like the foot people have always existed, folks. They were in the Epic of Gilgamesh, writing the story. We can't escape them. They're always amongst us.
Uruk, I shall make them sob for you. The people so bonny I shall feel full of grief for you. And I, after you are gone, I shall have myself bear the matted hair of mourning. I shall don the skin of a lion and go roaming in the wild. Guys, I'm not going to lie, it takes a pretty depressing turn after this, but we got 3 tablets left. I don't know why he's built like that. Gilgamesh does what he vowed to do. He wanders around and he mourns his friend Enkidu. But he is... How should I say this? He's not well. He's walking around the wilderness. He kills a lion and wears only its skin to keep himself warm. He stops shaving his beard. He grows his hair long. In a way,
he's just going through he's just mourning the bro, man. Like, he's lost the one equal he has in this life. He can't kill gods by himself anymore. It's just he's listless. I mean, this, yet again, for being one of the first stories I've written down, very, very accurate. It's like they were running, sprinting to write down these very human experiences once they had the ability, once they had that technology.
it's almost like he's kind of emulating Enkidu when he was first found in the wild. Maybe this is a subconscious sort of trauma response. I don't know. Fuck off.
Nice.
One night he wakes up from a terrifying dream. Have you noticed how important dreams are yet to this story? In this dream, he was contemplating his own mortality in the face of Enkidu's death. For his friend Enkidu, Gilgamesh was weeping bitterly as he roamed the wild. I shall die, and shall I not then be like Enkidu? Sorrow has entered my heart. I became afraid of death, so go roaming the wild. He woke with a start. It was a dream. In the presence of the moon, he grew happy to be alive. Essentially, he is so distraught by the death of his friend that he wonders if he should not too just lie down and die. When he is then confronted with death and realizes, in fact, oh my God, that's terrifying. He can't actually deal with the concept of dying, and he's gonna do something about that. All of a sudden, death is literally unacceptable. So this is when he resolves to go looking for Uttanapishti. This is the name of the man who survived the great flood sent by the gods to wipe out all of humankind, and is the only mortal to ever be granted everlasting life. The flood, you may have heard of. It's definitely a popular metaphor for human destruction in Sumerian and Babylonian literature, and obviously echoes, or rather is echoed, in the biblical story of Noah's Ark. Many generations of Sumerians and Babylonians would have experienced widespread flooding in this region. This flood myth was very close.
I mean, even to this day, as of today's date and recording, flooding is very on the tip of everybody's tongue here in Texas because of the tragedy that's happening on the Guadalupe River. It it's so easy to see that this is very much something that can and will happen again and again. The only difference is probably that what used to be their entire world, which is, this valley, of their nation, is now, just, we would see it as just being a small part of the globe. And so a localized flood wouldn't be considered a worldwide flood. Hey, folks, just wanted to take a moment to thank y'all so much for watching my video. Of all the different videos you could be watching right now, you chose my video and Fig Tree's video as well. I mean, it's a commentary on Fig Tree's video. I hope you're enjoying what I have to say. So before we get back to it, I just want to ask you really quickly, please like this video, subscribe to Joel Leaves, become a fence sitter, and share this video with somebody who you can just bro out with and go and kill gods with. All right, back to the video.
Linked with the human experience. Don't worry, I'll tell you a little bit more about the flood myth when we get there. We'll get there when we get there, kids. But all you need to know in this instance is that our Noah is Utanapishti, and he was given the gift of immortality after surviving the flood. And he lives in a really faraway place where no mortal should or could ever go. This is the place where the sun rises. And to get to it, Gilgamesh must travel through the path of the sun, which is a big long tunnel. Wait, now that he's dead, I gotta put down my little Enkidu.
Oh.
It's just Gilgamesh left, unfortunately.
Okay.
Anyway, Shamash, the god of the sun, remember, we love him. He loves our boy Gilgamesh. He uses this path of the sun every night because he has to travel back from where he sets in the evening back to here so he can rise in the morning. And to do so, like, let's say if we have like a little bit of a dome situation going on, Shamash rises through the day and then he sets in the night, right? And then he uses this tunnel to cut through the night to rise again in the day.
Genius.
And this little tunnel is where Gilgamesh has to go through to find Utanapishti. Follow? The tunnel is completely dark, darker than any mortal could survive, except this mortal, I guess. He has to walk through this tunnel.
Wait. Darkness is unsurvivable? That's interesting. I mean, it feels that way when you are in pitch blackness, though. It does feel like you're about to die.
4 hours to get there. It's implied that it's an entire day's length of 12 double hours, so 24 hours. He begins to walk. He can't see in front of him or behind him in the darkness, and the hours pass slowly. He struggles for breath in the heat. We get a long passage of each hour passing and still the same unrelenting darkness, wind blowing in his face, insufferable.
See, these are the parts that I feel like are meant to be orally performed versus read in written form, because I feel like a oral presentation can make entertainment out of a repetition through inflection, versus when you just write it down and you write basically it looks like the same thing over and over and over. It gets dull to the eye. Like, this is like one place where a performance versus versus reading it are just two completely different things. I think you'll see a lot of roadblocks in the Bible when you just read it that are very similar.
Heat. But as the 24th hour or the 12th double hour approaches, it finally begins to lighten. At 12 double hours, he came out before the sun. There was brilliance. Upon seeing the trees of the gods, he went straight up to them. A carnelian tree was in fruit, hung with bunches of grapes, lovely to behold. A lapis lazuli tree bore foliage, in all full fruit and gorgeous to gaze on. So this tablet is essentially an epic race with the sun. Sunrise and sunset take place on opposite ends of the earth, duh. And like we said, the path of the sun is the route between these two extremes. So this race must have been equal in length to the entire, diameter? Yeah, the entire diameter of the Earth. Crazy distance. And given the amount of time it took him to complete, he must have started before dawn and raced the literal sun, the sun god Shamash, the entire length of the tunnel to get out before the sun rose on the next day. Really an astonishing feat for even our...
Doesn't that sound like a good concept for a video game level? Like, I think maybe in the video game, like the sun is constantly coming up behind you and you have to find like a little little duck in for it to pass you up. But, it sounds like one of those Crash Bandicoot levels where you're running towards the camera and the rhino's behind you, or I think it was a rhino, was like behind you, chasing you down, and you have to avoid obstacles that are just barely popping up on screen.
great hero Gilgamesh. Anyway, what's cool is that there's this constant kind of repeating line in this passage where he keeps looking behind him and he can't see what's behind him because it's so dark. And this can be interpreted as maybe him looking back and checking that the sun wasn't catching up with him. And when he finally breaks forth from the darkness, the text states explicitly that he does so before the sun. So Gilgamesh has beaten the sun god Shamash to the far end of the path of the sun. And what he finds on the other side is this beautiful landscape, this forest where the trees are growing jewels. Slay. In Tablet 10, we're introduced to Siduri, and she is the keeper of a tavern on the edge of the ocean. And at the beginning of the tablet, she sees in the distance this wandering, pitiful Gilgamesh, most definitely mentally traumatized from his exhausting day-long race with the sun. Gilgamesh came...
I mean, he's just in his, what do they call it? Your washed period. I think there's something better, but yeah, he's going through some things. Like if Gilgamesh was, if this version of Gilgamesh was in the MCU, it'd be like Thor in Endgame, Fat Thor, you know?
Wandering, and he was clothed in a pelt. He was imbued with menace. He had the flesh of the gods in his body, but there was sorrow in his heart. So he's still bad. Taking him for kind of a delinquent, she kind of like locks all her doors and shuts her windows and goes upstairs and hopes that he just passes by and doesn't intrude. Of course, he does intrude. He's knocking on her door. He's asking why she's gone and locked all the doors. Look inward, brother. She doesn't really ask, but Gilgamesh tells her anyway about Enkidu and...
Oh, God. Brother. This guy stinks. No, Gilgamesh is the ultimate bro right now. Like the Epic of Gilgamesh is just the epic of, today could just be the Epic of Troy, or Frank, I guess, or Adrian. I'm trying to think of other common bro names.
And their adventures and their journeys, their various affronts towards the gods. And Siduri...
Dude, if this was like I have to deal with a lot of unhomed people at my day job, wandering around the streets of downtown Houston, and if all these people were actually just mumbling out the story of the epics that they've actually been a part of, I get it. Still, he probably should go with something else.
Asks him how a hero like himself can look so wasted and desolate and disgusting. And he responds, "My friend Enkidu, a mule on the run, donkey of the uplands, panther of the wild. My friend who I'm loved so deeply, who with me went through every danger. The doom of mankind overtook him. For 6 days and 7 nights I wept over him. I did not give him up for burial until a maggot fell from his nostril. I grew fearful of death and so roamed the wild. The case of my friend was too much for me to bear. So on a distant road, I roam the wild. My friend Enkidu, who I love, has turned to clay. Shall not I be like him and also lie down, never to rise again through all eternity?" I think this here is one of the most beautiful and heartbreaking moments in the entire story, where Gilgamesh, the hero, is reduced to this hopeless wanderer, unsure of why he goes on living when his best friend has died. What purpose does this serve when, just like in the beginning, he now no longer has an equal? We see the hero become weak. He couldn't even bear to bury Enkidu until he started to rot in front of him. The realization that Gilgamesh too will have to die fills him with such terror and dread that he goes on this relentless, wild quest for eternal life that he doesn't even think he deserves. I love this part. Siduri, perhaps just eager for this to be over, explains that to find who he's looking for, Gilgamesh must first find Ur-Shanabi, the boatman, who helped Utanapishti cross the waters of death. Luckily, Ur-Shanabi is nearby. He's just cutting timber in the forest. And Gilgamesh goes up to him, and Ur-Shanabi looks at him and is like, "Bro, why do you look so awful? Why?"
Yeah, brother, when the first person tells you look awful, you maybe have a little montage of bathing and cleaning yourself up before you go to the next person.
"You clad only in a lion's pelt." Gilgamesh once again explains how Enkidu's death awoke in him a deep desire to never die. And so Ur-Shanabi agrees to help him look for this immortal figure, Utanapishti. The two cross the waters of death, which can be seen as a sort of river Styx of sorts. And the current is so strong and intense, they need like 300 oars. As soon as it's used to pull them forward, it breaks because of how intense these waters are. So it's a bit of an arduous journey. Despite mortals not being allowed to actually cross these waters, this keeps happening. Gilgamesh keeps defying what mortals are able to do. Despite this, the two reach the shore and they
Oh, I'm sure it was a time for that. I mean, like, think about how quickly our phone evolved, over the first few years. This is like the first few years of conscious civilized humans. I'm sure they were constantly defying what a mortal was capable of. I'm sure they were like, oh wait, if we tend to this wound, you can actually survive an infection. The gods, they must be, upset with us for having defied their usual death trap. Oh, if we cook this food, we can eat things that normally would, make us feel very ill and potentially cause us death. And the gods, they must be so upset for we have defied them. I'm sure that they had just gone through this, like, rapid to finding out like the do's and don'ts and workarounds for what used to seem like death traps for most early humans. I hope you're enjoying the video so far, folks. I just wanted to stop and take a moment to recommend that y'all go out and check out X Seekers of Fortune, my game that I have designed with my good friend, and we are now manufacturing the game in China. We think the tariffs have kind of settled down and it is time to hit the ground running. So please, if you have a chance to go to our website, which is linked down below, xseekersoffortune.com, you can learn more about the game, you can pre-order the game, and you can also become a member of our community. So please see to that. Let me know if you have any questions about the game here in the comments section. And with that, let's get back to the video.
Find Uttanapishti on the other side of the waters of death. And again, Gilgamesh is asked why he looks so goddamn awful.
Oh my
That's
God,
3 for 3, unfortunately. Gilgamesh does his whole my best friend died spiel, and it's very clear at this point that Gilgamesh, what he really wants is an end of his suffering, and he believes that eternal life will grant him this. May they bar the gate of sorrow.
Well, maybe came a few millennia after you, Gilgamesh, but our old boy JC can offer that if you accept him as your Lord and Savior. But I have a feeling you wouldn't accept a god as your Lord and Savior, Gilgamesh. Hubris.
May they seal its doorway. He doesn't want to feel pain anymore. Uttanapishti responds with a monologue, calling Gilgamesh a useless king. Why, Gilgamesh, do you constantly chase sorrow? You who are built from the flesh of gods and men. He goes on to say that essentially Gilgamesh is not upholding the two most important pillars of kingship. 1, providing for the people of your kingdom, and 2, maintaining a relationship and trust between man and gods. By wandering the world on this futile quest, Gilgamesh is not fulfilling either role. And this is kind of the main theme of this second, darker, more foreboding half of our poem, in which Gilgamesh really just tries to do everything he can to outrun his destiny, unsuccessfully. Uttanapishti tells him that this quest in search of immortality has achieved precisely the opposite. It's drained his energy and is bringing about the end of his life far, far sooner. Now, that's what one Alanis Morissette would call ironic. You kept toiling sleepless, and what did you get? You're exhausting yourself with ceaseless toil. You're filling your sinews with pain, bringing nearer the end of your life. Uttanapishti reminds us and Gilgamesh of the suddenness of death, of the inevitable mortality of the human race, and the unbridgeable gulf that separates the living and the dead. We in the business call this a bit of a reality check. You are a mortal man, Gilgamesh. You cannot live forever. He also gives us the reason why people die. Sometime long ago, the mother goddess and the great gods got together and distinguished for the first time the difference between mortal and immortal. They decided that only gods would live forever and that men were always destined to die, and that the time of their death could never be certain. A very similar message is told to Gilgamesh in the old Babylonian version of this story by an old alewife. You cannot find the life that you seek. When the gods created mankind, from mankind they established death. Life they kept for themselves. The point is that man must die for no other reason than such is the fate outlined by the gods millennia before any of us were here. Even the greatest of men and the mightiest of kings must accept that their lives are just subject to the whims of still mightier forces. A king might have power over the mortal realm, but it's not within the power of any human to escape their fate. All who live must also die.
Boom. Amen. Like the ultimate message that every great story should kind of have within itself. I would almost say that the Epic of Gilgamesh seems like it could be divided into two different stories. One is the children's story, and one is the adult story. because I have this, and this could be its own video, like I keep saying, I have this general theory. Children's stories prepare us for life, adult stories prepare us for death. And it seems like Gilgamesh is on his like understanding death arc. And just imagine, like back then, like I said, they were in an era, or the story was forged in an era of rapid development, most likely. And I'm speculating, but I don't think people, I'd love to talk to a historian slash archaeologist about this. But we're talking about an era where things were being defied all the time. What was impossible now, through understanding, through civilization, is now becoming possible. So there must have been a time when it seemed, and we're kind of in a time, we're always in a time where it seems like just around the corner we may conquer death. And whether that's true or not, it's hard to say. I really hope not, though. I think that death is essential for life, but maybe not everything that happens that goes along with death, like pain or old age and enfeeblement, maybe those things can be conquered. But I still think we should have a clock that counts down, and and your time is done, because you have to make way for the next generation behind you. And honestly, progress is made one tombstone at a time, as they say. But yeah, I think that they were probably excited because they was probably like, there's some breakthrough might come around that we conquer death. And these days we have genetics, like, can we human genome out aging and thus death from the human experience? We'll see, but I think that no matter whether we do or don't, you're still going to have to embrace death. Oh man, I wish I hadn't paused.
This is unfortunately not what Gilgamesh came all this fucking way to hear. He's underwhelmed by Utnapishti, this mythological survivor of the flood, who looks like just some guy. He was expecting a giant, maybe one he would have to fight to earn the secret of immortal life. As I look at you, Utnapishti, your form is not different. You're just like me. You are not different at all. You are just like me. I was fully intent on doing battle with you, but in your presence my hand is stayed. How was it you attended the gods' assembly and found life? It's becoming more and more evident as we progress through this story that Gilgamesh's tactic of fighting any obstacle in his way is just not as effective as it was at the beginning of this story. He can't just throw his sword at a problem. Utnapishti decides to tell Gilgamesh the reason why the gods granted him eternal life. And he tells us the famous myth of the Great Flood in Babylonian mythology, which early in human history almost wiped out the entirety of mankind. This is the part of the story where we get a story within a story. A literary device this epic actually replicates from the 1987 cult classic film The Princess Bride. So I said I would, so I will give you a rundown of the flood myth.
Yet again, the story within the story, it's something that seems so advanced that they took, Citizen Kane to do on film, maybe for the first time. Allegedly, from my limited knowledge of cinema history, was already baked into the first story ever written down. Like we get it. We love I think hearing somebody, like, one of the best things, if you want to make a very inexpensive movie, one of the best things is having a good actor tell a story, especially if they can perform it in like an unbroken take, because that takes up a lot of screen time. And if they do it well, it is so compelling to listen to. And all it is filming dialogue, which is probably the cheapest thing you can do. Not even dialogue, a monologue. That's probably the cheapest thing you can do on film. So just keep that in mind. All it takes is good lighting and a single location and decent audio.
Utnapishti tells to Gilgamesh right now. Once upon a time, in the city of Surapak, when the gods dwelt among men, they decided they didn't want to do that anymore. There is actually no justification in the Epic of Gilgamesh given.
Yeah, because the Sumerians probably were like, it's like, we were never to blame. We didn't do anything wrong, versus the Hebrews, I guess, were like looking in more from the outside and being like, we brought this upon ourselves.
For why the gods decided to bring about the end of humanity, but they just decided it was time. And they decided to do it with a great flood that would extinguish all of life. The gods all swore not to tell anybody of their plan, but the god Ea, otherwise known as Enki, was kind of fond of humans. And he decided to tell his favorite, Utanapishti, because he wanted him to live and to be able to repopulate the earth. He instructed Utanapishti to tear down the palace and build a big ark, leaving all material goods behind and carrying with him only what was necessary to sustain life in all its varieties. When the ark was finished, he put the various species of animals on board, as well as people skilled in different crafts to preserve life in society, plus his family, plus all of his jewels and riches, which he was explicitly told not to do, but what the hell. And the deluge begins.
They always make some big mistake. I have a feeling this is going to come back and bite him in the butt, but we'll see. Just like Noah was a bit of a, maybe had to drink his sorrows away, and that caused him to not be the best guy after the flood. We'll see.
The violence of the storm that they created shocks even the gods, and they left their homes on earth to take refuge in heaven. The mother goddess was the first to kind of regret this decision, and she wonders how she could have created something to destroy the children of earth like this. The other gods were also kind of regretting their decision a little bit, but more so because without the worship of the people, they grew weak. When the water subsided, Utanapishti opened the ark and saw a flooded wasteland with no survivors. This is when he released 3 birds, which I believe is the same in the biblical account of this story. A dove, a swallow, and a raven he releases to the sky. The dove and the swallow return back to him, obviously finding no sustainable life, but the raven found food and did not return, so he follows the path that the raven took until he finds land. He finds land, he gets off the ark, he makes a sacrifice to the gods. The gods are happy because, oh my god, I thought I was going to die without anyone sacrificing anything to me. But also the gods are like,
it's like, oh, it turns out we love having subjects to lord over. It reminds me of current, one of the reasons I'm not super afraid of some sort of like the rich just completely gutting the poor is because at the very end of the day they are going to need us, the poor, to feel better about themselves. Like what fun would it be for those rich people to just have all their riches around them all the time? I think it'd be kind of boring for them if they didn't have some poor person to compare themselves to and think, oh, I'm so much better than them.
You alive, brother. So Enlil comes down and he's very angry that his plan for the extinction of mankind was thwarted by this mortal guy. Ea defends the mortal that he broke all the rules to save and says to Enlil that if Utanapishti was able to survive this magnificent plan, then he must be pretty intelligent and worth keeping around. And so Enlil came up into the boat. He took hold of my hands and brought me out. He brought out my woman. He made her kneel at my side. He touched our foreheads, standing between us to bless us. In the past, Utanapishti was one of mankind, but now Utanapishti and his woman shall be like us gods. So that's the myth of the flood. That is how he gained immortal life. At the end of his story, Utanapishti turns to Gilgamesh and asks him, who will convene a divine assembly to make you immortal? Utanapishti does not have the secret to eternal life. He was made eternal by favor of the gods under very unique circumstances. But now, who will bring the gods to assembly for you so you can find the life you search for? Ooh, fucking gagged him. Gilgamesh really needs a win, but he's just not going to get one. He, after this episode, just falls asleep. He's exhausted and depressed, and he sleeps for an entire 7 days. A sleep which is undisturbed by his usual array of symbolic dreams. When he wakes, he's confronted with the fact that he just slept for 7 days.
Yeah, that's how I usually feel after a bout of the old depression. Just like, oh my god, how much time did I waste like sleeping 12 hours a day? And
And this allows him to realize and confront his human limitations. He's just a guy. And if he can't withstand sleep, how could he conquer death? He knows he can't escape the fate of man. And there's this sad line where he admits that he already knows the angel of death has a hold of him. Wherever he goes, death will also be there lurking in the shadows, just waiting for the day that it can claim him. It's kind of emblematic.
Damn, he started this story as a little boy, and now he's a teenager.
Of the feeling that all humans have of knowing that death could be imminent. You just have to live with him kind of on your shoulder sometimes. How should I go on, Utanapishti? Where should I go? The thief has taken hold of my flesh. In my bedchamber death abides, and wherever I might turn my face, there too will be death. Yeah, that's rough, buddy. I guess you're just gonna have to deal with it. Utanapishti
Yeah, it's called Don't Be a Bitch. Just embrace it. Embrace death. And just go on living. Just knowing that you got to enjoy what you got right now, because it's not going to last forever. Am I talking to myself right now? Don't know.
Ursanabi, remember the boatman? Because he was not supposed to bring a mortal across the waters of death. That's kind of rule number one. This is also kind of the poem's way of eradicating a possibility of any future in which another man such as Gilgamesh should cross this barrier and make this quest. No chance of a sequel, you know? Uttanapishti tells Gilgamesh to go back to Uruk and continue with his life and hold up his kingly duties, and instructs Ursanabi to bathe him and wash him before his departure. As he's being bathed,
Finally.
the scars that he's accumulated as a hero dissolve, and all trace of the journey he has taken are washed away. He's shedding the hero role, the one he fought so hard to keep, the one he thought would give him eternal fame and glory and life. Gilgamesh boards the boat back with the boatman. They start the journey home when Uttanapishti's wife comes out and she asks her husband if he remembered to give Gilgamesh a gift for visiting. Gilgamesh in the boat, he hears this and he's like, let's turn this bitch around. I want a gift. I didn't come all this way for nothing. And Uttanapishti concedes that he has one more mystery to reveal to Gilgamesh. There is a plant that Gilgamesh can find which has in it the power of rejuvenation or a return to youth. Kind of immortality if he finds a way to regenerate this plant, I guess. This kind of seems to undermine the entire monologue that Uttanapishti just gave about Gilgamesh needing to accept the fact that he is a mortal man. But I think this moment is worth looking at as kind of another test for Gilgamesh to see if he has in fact accepted his fate or if he's just gonna keep on looking for something else to grab hold on because he can't accept his destiny. And he can't accept his destiny because he's like, I could find that plant. Yeah, I'll be young forever. Gilgamesh finds the plant. It doesn't take him very long, but uncertain of Uttanapishti's motives, he decides first to take it back to Uruk and to try out on an old man. Because who cares about old people, I guess. Very excited at this prospect of potentially continuous rejuvenation, Gilgamesh sets out back to Uruk finally with the boatman. He's pretty happy. On the way home, they stop and Gilgamesh takes a bath in this pool of water, and distracted, he doesn't notice that a snake comes and grabs the flower lying next to him. As it slithers away, it discards its old skin and becomes young again. You know how snakes be shedding their skin? So it works. That's why snakes do that, by the way, because they have the magic of this plant. But Gilgamesh finding the plant and seeing at the same time that it does truly work and its magic is real and that it will be forever denied to him just breaks down in tears. Again, he's come so close to eternity just for...
Wait, you didn't grab two of the flowers, bro? Like, I love how quickly this portion of the story has gone by too. It's like, you think like, oh, there's gonna be a whole nother tablet of him searching for the flower, and so like, no, he goes and finds it. And then it's also denied to him. Like, the pacing, bro. I mean, like, we got to do some work here. The writers of Gilgamesh, you gotta do some work for this narrative to resonate with today's youth.
To be snatched from him. Just a streak of losses, really. Then Gilgamesh sat down weeping, the tears streaming down.
A streak of loss. That's what life starts feeling like. It's true what they say. Life is like Tetris. Your successes disappear and your mistakes just pile up.
Side of his face. He spoke to Ursanabi, the boatman. For whom of my kind, Ursanabi, did my arms grow exhausted? For whom of my kind ran dry the blood of my heart? Not for myself did I establish a bounty. For the lion of the earth I have done a favor, had I only turned away and left the boat on the shore. He wishes he'd never even crossed the ocean in the first place because all it's done is add to his suffering. Uttanapishti had no secret of eternal life for him to learn. He couldn't conquer sleep. He failed to bring this plant back to Uruk. The limitations of his mortal self are quite incontrovertibly revealed to him. If the plant was a final test from Uttanapishti, it worked because Gilgamesh is 100% certain of his mortality and also 100% fucking depressed. Finally, Gilgamesh and Ursanabi.
Me too, brother. But no, that is very true. It's like, you know, what else could defy your immortality? Sorry, brain, work with me. But how else could you, you know, embrace your mortality more than to fail at becoming immortal? Seems pretty spot on. Oh, we're at tablet 11. Is there 12? There better not just be 11.
Arrive back in Uruk, and Gilgamesh's story ends the way it began. Gilgamesh spoke to him, to Ursanabi. Go up, Ursanabi, on the wall of Uruk, and walk around. Survey the foundation platform, inspect the brickwork, see if its brickwork is not kiln-fired brick, and if the 7 sages did not lay its foundation. 1 sar is the city, 1 sar date grove, 1 sar is clay pit, half a sar the temple of Ishtar. These closing lines are replicated from the very first tablet. On one level, the idea is that Gilgamesh has accepted his mortality, but has also understood that his immortal life lies in what he was able to create, these walls of Uruk. He lives on, essentially immortalized in the wall. But we have to think about the way that the city and this urban center has been talked about throughout the epic. For Babylonians, the city is the institution without which civilization isn't possible. And Uruk is this archetypal Babylonian city. The very last line, one star is city, one star date grove, one is clay pit, and half a star the temple of Ishtar. Gilgamesh is describing what he sees inside the city walls. The city, which is the residential area where people live and raise their families, the date groves where the food and sustenance come from, the agricultural activity and produce, the clay pits where bricks are made, where people are able to construct buildings and figurines and channel their creativity, and of course the temple of Ishtar, where man goes for spiritual and intellectual endeavors. These four activities, these four parts of the city that he outlines in this final line, are the four major activities that sustain human life: procreation, food production, manufacturing, mental, spiritual activity, all these enclosed within the city.
Your powers combined, I create a fully fledged human society. And don't neglect the last one, modern man.
That Gilgamesh created. The final line is not just Gilgamesh accepting that he is mortal and he just has to make do with that. He is telling us, the audience, to look at the city and learn that human life itself is eternal. Not one man, not one mortal can achieve eternal life. That's what he's told us through this entire epic. Gilgamesh has tried time and time again to achieve immortality through fame or glory, or through literally trying to live forever and not be able to confront death. Not only is that not possible, that's not relevant. Human life itself is eternal life. Human people come and go, but life itself is eternal. Though men are mortal, mankind is immortal. And by forming part of mankind, he forms part of that eternal life.
It's a great chain. It's that take that away. It's like you are part of a chain and you will continue to forge the chain, assuming that you get to contribute to society, whether it be through helping others, through, learning from one and passing that knowledge to another, or the even more important or more fulfilling version of that, which is to have children of yourself, your own children, and pass along your knowledge and your culture to them. That's why it's so important that we actually have culture and protect it and continue to spread it. It's one reason I think that, love it or hate it, our Christianity should probably be getting a suspect. Okay, sorry, somebody getting one of them Amber Alert type things. But what I'm trying to say here is that like the culture that we have created and cultivated, I mean, I'm afraid of it trying to radically, in the course of just a single generation or maybe two generations now, completely tear away like some of the very foundational roots, of it. I mean, like, I don't necessarily believe, the most important part of Christianity according to Christians, which is, the John 3:16 line. But I do think that this book is full of stories that we should, I should be able to wake up from a 100-year nap and still be able to communicate with somebody about the stories in the Bible, at least here in America. In Europe, I understand if East Asia and other big swaths of the world don't also have those stories, or they don't travel as far. They probably, hear about a third of them, just as we probably hear about a third of their stories. Anyways, but yeah, that's the important part. That's the eternal life, is a continuation of the culture.
So do you want to talk about
Excuse
it?
me.
Welcome to the other side. The one we promised to meet on in a time you don't remember. It's a little more chill here. Let's just have a chat.
Okay.
We just read a story about a very powerful man coming to terms with his own morality in the face of the gods. I want to talk about what that means. And I have some notes. What I can see really clearly in this is that there's a separation taking place here. The Epic of Gilgamesh presents us with three separate life forms: animal, man, God. There's almost a fourth, but it is explicitly denounced. We almost get animal, man, king, God. But our standard Babylonian version of the text presents us with a Gilgamesh who, while is king and has certain responsibilities he has to uphold that other humans don't, is no greater than the mortal man he was born as. Gilgamesh might be a king, but first and more importantly, he's a human. So
That's true. I mean, all a king is an elevated, human, and elevated not by any like genealogy, not any separation of evolution, just a, bearing, being the bearer of responsibility.
We have our beings imbued with life, animal, man, God, and the epic essentially works to detail these three and the difference between them, kind of creating its own animal kingdom and classifications of a sort. It draws clear boundaries between these three states of being, and much of the narrative revolves around what it means to move between them, or to try to. Animals represent the natural state, allegedly incapable of the same level of consciousness that we are so lucky to have as humans. They are not civilized, but they live in balance with the natural world, untouched by cities, language, mortality, or morality, for that matter. This peaceful existence.
Yeah, because maybe there's an argument to be made about the morality of a couple of animals out there that might have higher societal social functions and be a little bit closer to humans in terms of mental consciousness evolution. But yeah, I mean, it's like, is it evil for the lion to eat the elk, for it to pry upon the less powerful, the less hostile, the less capable animal, and to eat its flesh? No, it's not evil, at least from the lion's perspective. Is it evil from our perspective, judging the lion? I mean, I think you would be crazy to make that argument, but there's plenty of crazy people out there that I disagree with.
Is shown to us when Enkidu is created in the wild, an offspring of silence. Right? He runs with the gazelles, he drinks from the rivers, and he lives totally without shame or awareness. Him and the animals don't necessarily fear death because they don't comprehend it. Like, obviously animals have like a survival instinct, right? But their grasp on death and what it means, they're just really chill about it. So by introducing the animals, the epic tells us the general sentiments that the Sumerians and Akkadians had toward what makes man different from animal. Society. Wow. Yeah, true. I would agree. Humanity is social, and it expresses this sociality in the form of cities. Babylonian culture was an urban culture. Cities like Uruk and Babylonia and were the outlines of society, and the walls built to keep them inside also worked to keep the animals rolling the wild, and by extension their animalistic nature, out. But what happens when you divorce humans who, if you'll recall, are actually part of the natural world from their nature? I'm sure you feel it. Your separation from nature, keeping you safe, keeping you human. We've outdone ourselves with what we've been able to create and how well we've been able to convince ourselves that we're not animals. But then there's the call of the wild. If you could step outside and reconcile with a strange Mother Nature and ask for forgiveness for abandoning her, if you knew you'd be forgiven, would you run back into her arms? Or would you be too scared? Would it mean more to you to know that you're different, better, wiser? You're not an animal. You're worth more, right? Prove it. Gilgamesh dissociated.
Whoa, jeez. Okay, mommy.
From nature. Remember, 2 parts God, 1 part human. That means no part animal. Is restless with this separation. Leaving a divide between man and the animalistic ways of nature. He built the walls of Uruk to keep all that shit out. And he's a tyrant. Though he built civilization, he sacrificed a part of nature to gain it. To balance the scales, Enkidu is birthed from the wild.
Interesting that he's a tyrant. That's something, like I guess, knowing that, I don't know. But I don't necessarily have anything on that, but it's interesting that she emphasized that he's a tyrant right there, that he knows that that there's something maybe higher, or he feels maybe higher. Maybe this was a refutation to the idea that kings, maybe, I think I said it earlier, the idea that, and she said it right at the beginning of this section, that kings are not separate from humans. They are just humans, so they don't have a special moral code that they get to live by that is separate or more lax than every man, and they have to be held to the same standards. Maybe that's what this Epic of Gilgamesh, this really depressing story, is all about. Or morally about. Maybe. Let's see what she says.
Doesn't work though, does it? Because Enkidu falls for the allure of humanity. The moment he sleeps with Shamhat, he loses an integral part of his nature. The desires for sex, social connection, and knowledge entice him into a human experience, an agreed social contract, and he's lost Eden. Shamhat teaches him all the human things, like eating bread and drinking beer, the 2 genders. And when he goes to fight Gilgamesh to balance nature's scale, Nature loses. Enkidu is plied from his connection with nature and submits to Gilgamesh, tamed. This makes the betrayal even more heartbreaking when Enkidu and Gilgamesh journey to the cedar forest to destroy it. Killing Humbaba, who speaks for the trees, is very symbolic of the human intrusion on nature, destruction for the sake of progress. The Sumerians carried out major deforestation of oak and cedar trees in the forest surrounding Syria and Lebanon. And this episode of our heroes destroying the guardian of the forest is clearly meant to represent the civilization's destruction and triumph over wilderness. The most egregious severance between man and animal is when Enkidu kills another wild being, like a domesticated wolf sicked on other wolves, an animal turned into a weapon of humans against its own nature. That, Ovi, doesn't end well for Enkidu, does it? He feels a physical pain being separated from nature, but that doesn't stop him from round 2, killing the bull of heaven, another wild beast. His annihilation of these wild beasts is a form of...
I'm also going to say there probably should, in the modern rewrite that we're going to do, there should have been a third round that really sealed his fate. Like I think she said earlier, 2 strikes is all you get in these ancient Sumerian texts.
Self-annihilation, because essentially his destruction of them is what leads to his downfall. The epic takes the stance that when humans deny themselves their nature, pain will follow. To be human is to rise above the animal state, but to bear the burden of doing so. Next we have human, which if you're watching this, I think you probably are. Man, separate from animal. Yes. A higher being, one that must determine its own meaning and become very aware of its own mortality. And man is fundamentally limited in the way that gods aren't. What sets humans apart is not just their intelligence, it is their awareness of death. Neither the gods nor animals experience death in the same way that humans do. Gilgamesh and Enkidu both struggle with the knowledge that they're going to die. It's kind of what this whole thing is about. This anxiety drives nearly every major conflict throughout the epic. The finite amount of time we have on Earth compared with our cool and highly intelligent capability to grasp the vastness of the universe inspires in all a little bit of an existential crisis. I remember the moment I understood that I was going to die. I reacted kind of similarly to Gilgamesh, TBH, as I'm sure many of you did, not in terms of like needing to find the elixir of life, more in terms of like the not sleeping and the running around in the wild for a little bit. Although I did actually find the elixir of life as well, but I can't like legally tell you about that. Remember the opening line, the incipit of our epic, he who saw the deep. Remember how I said that I was going to talk about it eventually? This line introduces Gilgamesh as a man who has brushed against divine knowledge, not because he's part god, because he has suffered. He has questioned in a way that has stretched the human condition to its limit. His character development is defined by his desire to transcend human limitations. He doesn't want to die. He wants to have the power of a king, and then he wants to have the power of a god, driving a...
I think I see what you're saying. Like, that first line is referring to Gilgamesh at the finale of the story. And this is telling the story of how he's seen the deep, I presume. Because I would definitely say that Gilgamesh that she described at the beginning of the story, who was like, going around and deflowering brides and fighting animal men in the streets, had not seen the deep.
Stake deeper into the chasm he's created in the natural order. His story is emblematic of a very human search for meaning. People are ambitious because what else is there to be? We've been burdened with these crazy cognitive abilities, but what do we do with them? We seek fame and knowledge, we write stories, we fall in love, we question our place in the universe, but we cannot escape our mortality. All these marks we make on Earth, all the people we love, we do this knowing it'll end. We do it because it will end. In past versions of the text, we usually open with the line, surpassing all other kings. This places Gilgamesh above people, above man, perhaps closer to godliness than any mortal could be. But our version sees Gilgamesh deny divinity countless times. He defies the gods by killing Humbaba. He rejects Ishtar's marriage proposal. He runs on foot through the path of the sun. He doesn't see the deep like a god might, dispassionately and eternally, because that's how gods see everything. And his perception isn't shallow like an animal's. His sight is uniquely human. He's lived through loss, grief, love, and fear. He's faced incredible failure. He's felt immeasurable love for Enkidu and then deep sorrow at his death. And he returns from his journey, aka life, with an understanding that no god could teach him and no animal could comprehend. By the end of our story, Gilgamesh is human. He is us. We see the deep. That's our gift as humans. We fight to understand something no god ever could. The gods don't need to fear death, so they don't have to live an impassioned life. It means nothing to them to run out of time, to confess how you feel for someone because you don't know if you'll ever get the chance again, to jump into the water not knowing what's underneath, to feel that adrenaline, that rush, because who knows, I don't know, you could die, but you only live once, so what the fuck does it matter? Seeing the deep is the apex of human potential, not a transgression into godhood. It's something that only humans can do. You are handsome, Enkidu. You are just like a god. Why do you roam the wild with the animals? Shamhat says this to Enkidu when she first meets him. This line right here shows us the hierarchy of the universe. If animals are on one end of the spectrum, gods are their complete opposite. They hoard life for themselves and are the only beings capable of eternal life. Except, of course, Utapanishtim, because he's a special little cookie. Despite having eternity to work on themselves, the gods act almost childish. I mean, they have nothing pushing themselves to evolve or mature, so what the heck? They fight, they take offense, they change their minds all the time, usually at the expense of mortals. Ishtar has a whole meltdown when Gilgamesh rejects her and literally decimates the city of Uruk about it. The gods get bored with humanity and send the flood and then immediately regret it. And they bestow immortality to Utanapishti but refuse to do the same for Gilgamesh just because. When Gilgamesh finds Utapanishti, he is basically asking him for that god life force. Can I exist beyond my limitations as a human? And the answer is no.
It seems like he should have been asking other people. Like maybe he should have asked the big, the goddess of war and love for this immortality earlier. Maybe it just slipped his mind. But instead of jilting her, maybe he could have been like, "Hey, you make me an equal to you. We can, I can screw with that."
Can't. Just like how Enkidu was punished for turning his back on the animal world, Gilgamesh has planted himself within humanity and he can't change that. And immortality is not something that can be earned. The gods didn't earn immortality. It's just innate in them. And they actively decided that they were the only ones who would ever have it. There's a cosmic order, babe, and you're just a part of it. So to those reading the Epic of Gilgamesh hoping to find the secret of immortality, unfortunately, it does not offer that. What it does offer you is something...
Why the did I watch this? God darn it.
Much richer. The dignity of death, the sacredness of memory. And that's something the gods won't ever have. They just don't get it like we do. You and me. Humans. Except me, I am actually a god, but I get it anyway. So that's it. That's all I really have to say. This is the longest video I've ever made, and I'm not going to tell you how long I've been working on it because it's actually kind of embarrassing. But I hope it was fruitful for you, and maybe you know more about Gilgamesh than you did an hour ago.
100%.
Cheers, babe. I'll see you soon. I promise.
Bye-bye.
Mwah.
Well, wasn't that something? That video was definitely enlightening. A story I'd wanted to get to for a long time. It really reminded me of a Wendigoon video, like when Wendigoon retold or told basically the story of Paradise Lost, Paradise Regained, Blood Meridian. Stories I've been meaning to get to, but I'm really lazy and I don't read all that much. It really helps when somebody like Fig Tree comes along and just lays it out and helps create, sort of like this audio book club kind of thing that I'm wanting to see more and more of. So if you enjoyed this video, please give it a like. If you enjoyed Fig Tree's video, the link should be below. Go and like her video too. Watch it without my commentary if you haven't, and if you were interested enough, make your own conclusions. But if you enjoy what I'm doing here on this channel, please subscribe. And if you have a bro in your life or somebody in their life who is dreading death, who's going through a hard time, not quite embracing their mortality, send them this. Let them know that what they're going through right now has been gone through before, and it will be gone through after they've been here on this world. So please go out and share this video with somebody who needs to hear the message. Besides that, as you know, I am a game designer, and there's a link down below to xseekersoffortune.com for you to learn more about that. We're getting rave reviews right now from anybody and everybody who sits down and plays the game. So please come and join our community on Discord. Otherwise, all I have to say is enjoy yourself. Damn it. I'm going to cut that out anyways.